What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Wisconsin Sportsman Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Raley. If you listened to episode 1, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning back in to episode 2. Your support means a lot. If you didn't catch episode 1, make sure to go and check it out. We caught up with Brett Owsley from the Wisconsin DNR to talk about all the options that sportsmen have here in the state of Wisconsin. It was a really informative conversation, and I really hope to have Brett on again in the future. Just a great guy. But in today's episode, we're chatting with Mr. Shane Simpson. You've probably heard of Shane from his YouTube channel, Calling All Turkeys, where he chronicles not only his turkey hunting adventures on public land, but also his deer tracking adventures on his playlist called the Cali Chronicles. Maybe you've even heard of him through some stuff that he's done for the National Wild Turkey Federation. Shane is an absolute wealth of knowledge. He is a champion turkey caller. He's an excellent woodsman and hunter. And to be honest, he's just a super down-to-earth and humble guy. You know, this podcast is just getting started. Nobody in the world knows who I am. Nobody's heard of me, but yet I reached out to Shane and said, hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I know you hunt quite a bit in Wisconsin, and he was more than happy to jump on and give me some of his time, give us some of his time, and share some of his knowledge with us. And so super grateful for Shane. Glad that he would be able to jump on with us, and I had such a great time getting to chat with him. I recorded this episode with Shane right before turkey season started, but when it drops, we'll have just over a week or so left in the Wisconsin season. Now, hopefully you've had a successful turkey season so far. If you're tagged out already, this podcast will help you put some stuff in your arsenal for next year, or maybe it'll prompt you to buy one of those leftover tags and get out there and chase some of these birds one more time before the season ends. If you've still got a tag in your pocket like I do, I hope this inspires you to get out there and hunt hard for the time that you have left. I know I've been out there hunting hard in the heat for the last week. I've had a little bit of luck. I've been on the turkeys, was finally able to connect with one this morning, and I'm going to have one more tag that's good starting tomorrow morning. So I know I'm going to be putting into use some of the things that I have learned from Shane. So I tell you, these late season birds are tough. But I've got a little bit of season left. With the next episode, I'm going to recap my turkey season, how that's gone so far, talk a bit about a couple of lessons that I have learned all along the way. I am a novice turkey hunter at best, but I have learned a lot of really tough lessons this year, and I've learned them the hard way. But that's for another time. You're here today to hear from Shane Simpson, so let's jump right to it. On the line with us now is Mr. Shane Simpson. Shane, how are you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Doing very well. If people don't know about Shane, tell us a little bit about you.
Ooh, that's a long story. I'll just try to be as brief as possible. Born and raised South Carolina. Grew up hunting down there, mostly public land. Love turkey hunting, deer hunting. 13 years ago, moved up here to Minnesota. Female involved, let's just say that. It wasn't work related. That's why I'm stuck in there in this cold state.
Oh.
But it's nice up here. A lot of hunting opportunities, and so that more than made up for it. Got into competition calling back in 2009. Started filming hunts and hunting with others and filming their hunts, and started putting it on YouTube so they could watch it, and that kind of turned into a YouTube show. And you know, been doing the competition calling still, and doing lots of turkey hunting and you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a brief summary. That's how I got to where I'm at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have heard of you have probably heard of either Cali Chronicles, right, doing tracking for deer, and then also Calling All Turkeys on YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, they're just different playlists on the same YouTube channel. If you just look up Shane Simpson on YouTube, you'll find my channel.
Okay. Good deal. Well, I heard you say a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast, and this podcast that we're on obviously is focused on the state of Wisconsin. It's called the Wisconsin Sportsman Podcast. So we're going to focus on all things Wisconsin. I heard you talking about turkey hunting on another podcast, and you said that Wisconsin was one of your favorite states to hunt in for turkeys. Why is that? What makes Wisconsin unique?
It's 15 minutes away from me. No, Wisconsin, in my opinion, just is a role model, number one, for other states, and it's primarily I'm talking turkey hunting.
Hmm.
If you get into other things like deer and stuff, then there might be more at play. But for turkey, as a turkey hunter, they have eastern wild turkeys, which is one of my favorite subspecies to hunt. As a non-resident of Wisconsin, they have reasonable license fees for non-resident. I know a lot of people like to promote overcharging non-residents because they don't, with air quotes, pay their fair share. But I think they're getting. I think the way Wisconsin had it is a fair way to do it, and they have. I mean, you can pick up multiple tags, leftover tags. The way their system is for tagging, the tagging system, you have some hunters that are content with hunting a few days and killing one bird and then going off fishing. Then you have guys like me that would like to be able to extend my season and maybe have multiple tags and hunt throughout, all of May as much as possible. And so the way their tagging system's set up, it allows for that. The guys that don't necessarily want to hunt as much as I do, they can buy one tag and I can get three or four. Um, and there's lots of public land. I'm a public land hunter, and I mean, not only do you have WMAs, you have MFLs and CFLs or whatever those other ones called, crop. Uh, what are they? CMLs, CFLs, something like that. Managed forest law, voluntary access, public access, VPAs, you name it. They have so many different types of public accessible properties. And when you add that all up, there's plenty of public land to go around and allows you to find places with light pressure, light hunting pressure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times I can go hunting, especially during the week, and not see another vehicle because of that fact. And if I do see one, there's another place right down the road I could go try and hunt.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's a few of the factors why I think it's tops in my book.
Yeah. What about the numbers here? So you hunt all around the country. I think I heard you say the other day you killed turkeys in what, 16, 17 states, something like that.
Yeah, it's probably close to that. I don't necessarily try to kill one in every state. I'm not trying to get my what do they call it, the U.S. Slam, kill one in all 49 states that have a huntable population. I basically just look at when state seasons open and how can I fit my schedule to to leave one state and go to another one and the season's already open. So I tend to end up hunting the same general states every year, core states, and then I may add one or two new ones each year. And so it's probably somewhere in that area, 16 to 18 states. I'm gonna add a couple more this year. And what was your question about?
Yeah, just
Sorry, I
being
got
no, that's okay. That's okay. So as somebody who gets to travel around the country, a lot of what we've been hearing over the last couple of years is that turkey populations are going down. Turkey populations are not doing well. Can you speak a little bit to that? And then maybe what have you observed here in Wisconsin in particular? Do you think Wisconsin's being hit with the same thing, or do you think we still have a pretty healthy population?
it's hard to say. I think it's different when you look at public versus private land. I know for sure there's a downward trend in the populations in the south, the southeast, that sort of thing. Um, but like up here, say in Wisconsin, for instance, I see tons of birds when I'm riding around, tons of birds on some of the private lands that I either have access to or my buddies hunt, and those appear to be normal. But then the public land, and I didn't hunt it a tremendous amount this past year. It seemed like there was less turkeys, or at least less vocal turkeys, than there was the year prior. Now, last year was COVID, and I saw a lot more hunters out, and so the increased pressure can just make the birds shut up. I saw turkeys sign. There was tracks and droppings and all that stuff. So it was obviously still turkeys there. It's just they weren't being as vocal. Increased pressure will cause those birds to move or go quiet. I don't think it's as big of a threat or of a concern. It's always a concern, but it's not nearly in the condition it is down in the south and southeast. There's South Carolina, for instance, where I grew up, is night and day from 15 years ago or 20 years ago. It was nothing to go out there when I was younger to hear 10 birds gobbling on the public land I hunted.
Wow.
Towards the last time I hunted it, or the last few times I heard birds, it would be maybe one bird I'd hear, maybe two at the best. The very last time I was able to hunt that piece of property, I didn't see turkey track. I didn't hear a turkey gobble. I didn't see any sign of turkey. It was like they just vanished from this one chunk of public. And the pressure was always there on that public. So I don't think it was hunters that caused the decline. It's obviously something else at work there. So I mean, think if you're in Wisconsin, be thankful with the way that the state of the turkeys are right now. You're in your golden days right now for sure.
Yeah, I moved up here about a year ago to the state of Wisconsin, and when I first got here, I looked at the tag system, and I'd moved up too late. I wasn't able to put in for the lottery, and so I
Mm-hmm.
started reading all these regulations. And at first, it overwhelmed me, but it wasn't quite as bad getting into it and figuring it all out as I thought it was going to be at first. But uh, I had never really hunted turkeys much before, and the 7 years that I hunted in Louisiana before moving up here, hunting for deer and things like that, never really turkey hunting, I saw one turkey the entire 7 years that I was down there. And I come up here, my first spring hunting, I get two birds,
Yeah.
fill both my tags, and population appears to be doing doing pretty well, and lots of really really vocal birds. But you're right. So last year I saw a lot of folks out on public land, which is good. We want people to use the resource, but
Yeah.
yeah, so it's good to see folks out.
I'm hoping that I know there lately in the past couple of years I've seen some complaints online about the number of hunters. They're some of the statements read are, I don't believe what the states are telling us that hunter numbers are down or license whatever, because I'm seeing more hunters on public than I ever did before. Um, I I know that the number of hunters is basically remained steady. As the population's gone up, the percentage of hunters in relation to that has stayed. So you're actually the overall percentage based on the population of the United States, the number of hunters has gone down, but the same amount of hunters are still out there.
Mm,
If that makes sense, what I'm
yeah.
saying.
Hmm.
Um, but I encourage people that are going to public. I mean, I look at the positive side, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and I'm hoping that the I'm stumbling on my words here. I'm trying to put it in something easy to say. I'm hoping this creates a movement to preserve our public lands or increase our public lands. And I know a lot of people they enjoy their solitude and their little honey hole, and they don't have any hunting pressure there, and they don't like the added numbers. But eventually, your little spot's going to go away if we don't protect it. And I think that's one of the big realizations a lot of people, hopefully, they're seeing from this is, hey, there's not enough public land to go around. Maybe I should join a conservation group or some group or get something started to help preserve what we have and maybe acquire more, because it's land's something that's never going to be created more of. It's just getting smaller and smaller. Particularly huntable lands.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to the THP guys the other day, and one of the things that they were highlighting is they're trying to get as many folks hunting land as possible, hunting public land in particular as possible. And they said that they figure the more people they can get into hunting, the more people there will be to protect it
Yeah,
whenever it's in trouble. And it's one of the things I've appreciated about living here in Wisconsin. So I talked with somebody at the DNR the other day, and he talked about, they're actively looking to make land acquisitions. They're actively looking to purchase land. When people come to them and say, hey, I've got this 100 acres or 300 acres or whatever, they're doing what they can with the dollars that they've got to acquire more and more public land for people to enjoy, not just for turkey hunting, but for all sorts of purposes.
On that point, if you go back to some of my older YouTube videos, one of the properties I hunted in Wisconsin is now a WMA.
Oh, wow. Really?
The landowner, he passed away recently, but talking to me, he would rather have seen it be used by the public than to be sold and go to in the hands of somebody that's going to exploit it for whatever reason, or just use it for solely themselves. And
Wow.
when it came down to it, he said before he died, he was that's what he decided to do, and he sold it to the DNR, and it's now huntable by the public, and it was a great thing by him, I think.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. We need more people with that kind of generous spirit looking to do
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. That's something we all benefit from. Absolutely. Well, we kind of touched on it a little bit. I think over the last year, more people are getting outside than ever before. I think COVID really pushed folks on a couple of areas, but one was, what can I actually get out and do? How can I get out of my house? And two, where is my next meal going to come from? Right. So we saw
Yeah.
shortages at the grocery stores and all sorts of things. And I
Or
think that,
in toilet paper. What am I going to use to wipe with?
I haven't seen anybody pick up the hobby of making toilet paper yet. I see a lot more folks deciding to go
Oh,
hunt their own food, but
I've got a barrel downstairs with wood pulp in it. I'm working on a batch.
there you go. Maybe I'll come over and I'll have you back on the podcast to walk us through the process. Maybe.
I've got plenty of underwear and socks and stuff I can use if I ever run out, I guess.
There's been lots of underwear and socks left in the
There's
woods.
not a shortage of those at the store, is it?
No, it doesn't appear to be. Not right now. There might be after this podcast drops. I don't know. We'll find out. So I think we've got a lot more guys who are getting into the woods for the first time. Like I said, last spring was my first time really getting after turkeys. So let's talk a little bit about the guy who's just starting out when it comes to turkeys. Now, I'll say it seems overwhelming. When I watch guys like you, I watch THP, I watch these folks on YouTube, and I'm like, holy cow, the things that they're doing to get after some of these birds. It seems like a lot to take in all at once, especially somebody who maybe wasn't raised hunting turkeys,
Yeah.
or someone who's an adult and doesn't have that that opportunity as a kid to get out with a family member or whatever. So let's talk a little bit about the guy who's just getting into it. The first thing I want to touch on is, just like with deer hunting, turkey hunting seems to be a really, really gear heavy sport. Like we're marketed to, you need 37 calls and this $300 vest that you go and buy to, and then go sit on this $500 seat in a $300 blind. What would you tell the guy who's just starting out? What do you need to have to walk into the woods and effectively hunt turkeys?
Well, it's only gear heavy if you make it that way. When I was starting out, I went, I think after my first year, I saved up my money and I bought my first turkey vest. I think I paid $80 for it at the time. And it had lots of pockets. And I wanted, if there was a pocket, I wanted something. If there was a pot call pocket, I was going to buy a pot call to put in there, whether I actually needed it or not. I just thought it was the coolest thing.
Sure.
And every spring I went to the store because I was excited about turkey season coming up and I was buying more gear. And, like you said, marketing towards turkey hunters, it's easy for them to market towards turkey hunters because we get excited for the upcoming season, and buying gear is something we do to pass the time or to help with that excitement. But with that said, you can go buy a lot of gear, but you don't need all that. To get started, if you're new to turkey hunting and you're new to turkey calling, obviously you're going to need a call that's a little bit easier to run than, say, a mouth call. Mouth call's got the biggest learning curve. A pot call or a box call is going to be your ticket. And you don't need two or three of them. If you just want to get one good one, that's fine. That's enough to kill a turkey. I would also suggest that you do get a mouth call and start practicing with it, because there is a huge advantage to being able to use a mouth call. Even if you're not proficient at it, if you can just make some soft sounds and stuff, so that when you're using your box call or pot call that requires hand movement, as that gobbler gets closer, you're not going to be able to move. So set it on the ground and get your gun ready and just make some soft, little soft yelps or whatever you can muster as he gets closer. And so basically, to start off, you probably just need a pot or a box call and a mouth call or two. Mouth calls are relatively inexpensive, so it shouldn't be a problem buying a couple of those. You don't need a big expensive turkey vest. It's nice to have a little padded seat. I've gotten to the point now. I've become a minimalist. If I wasn't carrying camera gear, I'd have a mouth call and a shotgun and my owl hooter. That'd be the only three things I'd carry. I won't even carry a pad with me to sit on. If the ground's wet, I'll just sit on the ground. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older, but I find the ground's more comfortable than those padded seats sometimes. They just seem to make my butt go numb. So if it just all depends on how gear heavy you want to get. So I'll start the basic minimum is you and a shotgun and have camouflage, obviously. I use face paint for my face and hands. You can use a little netted camo face net. So shotgun, camo, a couple mouth calls, a pot or a box call. Then you can add from there. If you want to add a decoy, I would suggest if you're just going to get one type of decoy, get it like a Jake. Jakes tend to do better than hen decoys as far as pulling that gobbler into gun range. With a hen decoy, the gobbler can strut out there outside of gun range and display for the hen. If she doesn't come to him, then he's like, oh, she's not interested, and leave. If you have a Jake or a male decoy in front of you, he wants to run that male decoy or that male turkey off. And in order for him to do that, he has to come up, come to within gun range of that, or come into to that decoy and be within gun range of you. Um, but a decoy is optional. I find myself hunting with one, without one, much more these days, especially if I'm hunting in the timber. There's no huge advantage to it, especially if you hide yourself well and make the turkey come look for you. And then, like I said, you just can grow from there, depending on what your budget is or how you want to hunt. If you want to add ground blind, that's fine. I would actually advise away from using a ground blind if you can help it. I think there's nothing, I don't have any negative opinions about it as far as I think it's cheating or anything. I think it's hurting your experience. When you're in a ground blind, my daughter hates hunting out of a ground blind because she can't see as well, she can't hear as well. We not only can we not hear the turkeys as well and all the other birds, it's part of nature, that's part of the whole experience out there. That our calling is dampened when we're calling. The blind kind of hampers that. I think it's just much more enjoyable experience just to sit beside a tree and feel the warm breeze in the spring and hear all the birds and
Yeah.
and communicate with the turkeys. But nothing, I have nothing against it otherwise. I just think it hurts yourself a little bit. You can get into expensive shot shells and chokes and all that good stuff. It all comes down to how much gear you really want to have. That's basically the way to put it. But you can certainly be successful out there with the bare minimum.
Yeah, with not a lot of stuff. So you talked a bit about, you touched on a lot of different pieces there. When it comes to calls, let's say, I've heard you talk a lot about understanding your airflow.
Yeah,
Mouth calls obviously have a pretty steep learning curve. I'm currently on that learning curve, trying to figure out some mouth calls. And when I first heard you talking about understanding your airflow, I thought I just sucked on a bunch of different kinds of calls. But I thought, man, this one actually works for me or whatever. Talk a little bit about how do you figure out your airflow as an individual, and then go and try to capitalize on that when you're choosing calls in the future.
yeah. So I just kind of discovered this by accident quite a few years ago. I was practicing with my calling, and I had learned which calls seemed to work better for me just by, every spring I'd buy two or three kinds, and the next spring I'd probably buy the same two or three kinds, and I always end up tossing a couple of them and keeping the one that was maybe a reverse combo cut. So I didn't really know why that call worked for me. I just knew, okay, this call sounds better than the other ones. And I got into competition calling, and I really had to concentrate and pay attention to how I was calling and how I was making the sounds. And I accidentally hit that front end note, which was the hardest for me to get, a nice clean front end note in my Yelp. I could key a little bit, but I did it in a different manner than the way I ended up learning to do a front end. And I was on the phone with Scott Hook, with Hook's Custom Calls, and I was like, Scott, I don't know what's going on, man. I hit that front end, but I'm not sure. He said, try hissing like a cat. That'll kind of help you get your tongue in the right position. And I'm not so sure that Scott knew anything about airways. I think just the way he blew the call, and he's
Mm.
able to blow the call pretty good. So I did that, and that front end note came out. I'm like, oh, you're onto something. I got it. And I was like, I'll talk to you later. I hung up and I went to go practice. And so I was like, what's going on? So I held a mirror up to my mouth and I took a flashlight and looked in there, to see what was going on. And I could see that little channel of air form. And mine just happened to be off to my left. And I think what a lot of people fail to realize is we're not all perfect. We're not built perfect. Like your your ear may be bigger than the other ear. We're not perfectly symmetrical.
Sure.
And so to assume that when you blow a mouth call, the air is going to go right down the middle of the call or across all the reeds the same. I think that's what gets the reason we have that trouble learning calls. We don't understand that we're not all perfect. My airflow just happened to be off the left. A little channel of air forms to the left of my on my tongue. So I went to Grand Nationals, the Grand National calling competition in Nashville, and while I was there, I was like, "Hey man, can you blow a clear front note to the competition callers and let me just open your mouth a little bit? I know this is weird. Let me look in there." And I'd see their little channel of air forming, and depending on what call they were blowing, it matched their airflow. So they didn't really know, but they had learned which cuts worked for them, but based on how the calling sounded. And I was like, "Yep, that's what it is. That's
Interesting.
definitely." And so I went home and after a while of researching everything, I came to the conclusion of what was going on, and I created a video called Mouth Call Mechanics, and it explains, like your top read that has the cuts in it. That's where you get your rasp. The next read is where the front end note, the clean note. So imagine when you were a kid, you'd take a blade of grass and put it between your mouth and blow on it and get that
Mm-hmm.
high pitched squeal. That's basically what the second read is doing. It's giving you that high pitched noise. And when you put the two together, you get that nice yelp at the front rolling over into the rasp. And it's just a matter of relaxing your tongue as you do that and be able to do it quickly. And after a while of practicing, it just happens. Just like if you bent down to pick something up, you don't have to think about closing your fingers. You just do it. And so I actually shot a video years ago, filmed inside my mouth, me keying and yelping and stuff. And I don't know where that footage is now. I can't find it, but you could see the little channel of air form. And so what I in that video, I explained the best way to figure out what call is going to work for you is just to take a two read uncut call. That way you don't have that top read that's cut to interfere and introduce rasp yet. You want to learn to put air across the reeds properly to begin with. A lot of people will rush this step and go into a cut call, and you need to get to the point where you can make that nice clear note and and get good at it, where a week later you can just toss the call in your mouth and go blow that nice clear note. Then you're ready to move on. A lot of people would like to practice an hour and then try to yelp, and that's where they hurt themselves. But anyway, after you learn that front note, then you need to look in the mirror and blow that call to get that front end note and try to see that little channel of air. This is difficult for people to do because it usually requires you to it does require you to open your mouth a little bit, and sometimes it's difficult to blow the call when you're opening your mouth a little bit. So in my kit that I created, I put three different other calls in there. One with the cut, the top read is cut to expose that second read on the left side, one in the middle, and one on the right. So then you just put each call in there and try to create that front end note again. You're not trying to get raspy yet, but you're trying to see which call allows you to produce that front end note. If the ghost cut or center cut call works for you, then that's where your air channel is. It's in the center. And if the one on the right works, and vice versa, so on and so forth. So basically, once you go through that whole process and learn which call works for you. So for myself, I use a left, any calls with the left side gap cut in the top read, reverse combos, any call like that. I can run a bat wing where it has cuts on both sides. Like because the left side is cut also, I can use those. And that's probably what a lot of hunters notice is they go to the store and they buy the hand hammer or whatever they call these calls. The manufacturer gives it some fancy name, or the seducer, or the gobbler getter. Don't worry about the name of the call. Look at the cuts in the top read, and you'll notice that, hey, I seem to favor those ones that are cut to the left. My airflow must be over to the left, and then you can practice on that. If you try to practice on a call that's not designed for your airflow, it'll just make the whole process a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I jumped on some mouth calls last year, tried to get into using them, and I bought one or two. Not a lot of variety. I just bought this little pack, some that came all together, and I blew on those things, and I could get nothing out of them, and it was miserable. I ended up throwing both of them away, and then right before turkey season, I said, you know what, I'm gonna give it one more shot, and I just happened to get one that fit my mouth well, and that was the only call I took into the woods with me last year. I jumped right on it and was able to. I definitely am guilty of rushing it though.
Yeah,
like you said here, people jump on, and I realized in listening to you talk with somebody else, the reason I was successful last year, I think, is because I was basically Jake yelping the whole time I was out there.
I think with a lot of hunters, they sound like Jakes, and Jake yelping is a very effective call. Actually, So I wanted to also mention that, you said you grabbed a couple calls. Not all call makers use the same tension and the same thickness of reeds. So don't get hung up on one brand, or if you buy brand A and you say, "Oh, it sounds like crap. I'll never use their stuff again." It may have been you just had the wrong cut.
Hmm.
But then again, they may have the right cut for you. And because of the different tensions and different back tensions and different thicknesses of reeds, some calls are more difficult to operate because they require more air.
Okay.
So that's another thing you can't get hung up on. A guy that's proficient at it could run those calls and sound good, and you may not because it's just requiring more air, and you haven't quite learned how to put air across the reeds properly.
Gotcha.
So I would suggest not only buy multiple cuts, a left cut, a right cut, center cut type of call, but maybe buy it from several different manufacturers and just test the different thicknesses of reeds and tensions, and get something you like. I mean, you may grab one that's a left cut from one manufacturer and grab a from another manufacturer one that's left cut, and you're able to blow one of those two calls or both. So just don't worry about the manufacturer at this point. You're concerned about getting the proper cut, and then you can move forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned getting just an uncut two reed call as a place to start, and that's going to
Yeah,
help us learn to put air across the reeds appropriatly, and then we
yeah,
can take that next step into
yeah,
some that are cut,
yeah.
moving on from there.
If you can't create that nice clear whistle sound, like a key of a young turkey, it's just.
Mm-hmm.
But if you should be able to produce a solid note, if you can't do that on a two reed call, then you're not ready to move forward.
Okay.
You're not putting air across the reeds properly. That's the easiest call to blow. And I know some people are probably thinking, why are you using two reeds? Why not just one? This is you could use one reed if you're going to make the call yourself or have somebody make it for you. In my kit that I created, I did two reeds uncut. That's because in the three reed calls, the one that has the cut reed on top, it still has two reeds uncut underneath, and I wanted that tone of that clear note to be the same on both. I didn't want to add another variable. So if anybody's asking, that's why. You could always have a one reed uncut and then have a two reed with a cut on top and have a single reed and get the same effect. But if anyone's wondering, that's why. It doesn't have to be two reeds uncut, it could be one.
Okay. So you mentioned the kit you created. Is that something that's commercially available?
Yeah, it's on my website, callingonturkeys.com. And a lot of people like once they figure out the call they like, will come back and order. So the kit comes with the two reed uncut, it comes with a ghost cut, it comes with a combo cut and a reverse combo. So it covers your uncut and your three different cuts for all sides of your airflow. And then I've had a lot of people buy the kit, realize a combo cut works for them, and every year they order, two or three combo cuts. And they hunt with those. And so I do keep those in stock for that purpose.
Okay.
The main reason I created the kit though was just to help you get your airflow. It wasn't for you to. And now I hunt with the calls too. I hunt with the bat wing that's in that kit. I mean, not in that kit, but I take the same. It's the same call constructed, and I just make it into a bat wing. Or I use the reverse combo that's in that kit. I also use the some calls from hooks as well. But I mean, they're great calls. It's just when I created the kit, it was to help you discover your airflow or where your channel of air is, and that was the main purpose of it, not to get
Sure.
rich or anything.
Yeah, you know the money. It's in turkey calls, right?
Yeah, they don't cost much. It's basically covering the cost of materials and my time, getting it to you and everything.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you mentioned too a box call and a pot call. I think a lot of people are really familiar with a box call. It's probably one that they've seen laying around in their grandpa's shed or something like that, or something you can pick up at a garage sale pretty cheap. Pop calls, however, I've noticed a big difference um, when you buy a quality pot call and you buy one that's
Oh yeah,
not
it's
so great.
big, a huge
I
difference.
I bought a cheap one last year. So talk to me about what am I looking for when I'm buying, let's say a pot call, and I want one that's a decent quality call.
You're not actually looking, you're listening.
Okay.
And that's going to take experience to hear a call and know that it has turkey sound in it. That's part of becoming a turkey hunter too. A lot of hunters make the mistake of listening to their buddies, like, oh, my buddy sounds good. wish I could call like him.
Mm.
Instead, you should be on YouTube listening to real hens and saying, yeah, she sounds real. That's who I should be emulating. And one of the other things I should bring up, it's going to be my little soapbox moment here,
Let's do
is
it.
don't listen to the guys online that tell you, oh, don't worry about your calling. I've heard hens that sound worse than the hunters. That's absolutely 100% false. There's not a
Wow.
hen out there that sounds worse than a hunter. I mean, just the fact you're saying that a turkey that talks sounds worse than a turkey that talks. um, but my point is, those guys usually just don't have an ear for turkey. The
Wow.
guys that have hunted a long time can hear a call in the woods or hear a turkey in the woods and immediately distinguish between the two. Turkeys are turkeys; they sound like turkeys. And if you want to be a great hunter or improve your odds, I shouldn't say you're not necessarily going to by default become a great hunter by just being a great caller, but it certainly uh, puts odds in your favor when you can emulate what a turkey sounds like and all the different um, vocalizations they make. You know, yelps and keys and little bubble clucks and soft stuff. Once you get capable on all those, it definitely helps. But worry about sounding like a real hen. And I guess I'm off on a tangent a little bit, but
No, I'm glad to hear you cover that because I have heard that all over the place, especially when I first started. Okay, I'm going to do some turkey hunting, and I'm talking with people or I'm reading online, and I saw that repeated a lot.
and
I've
here's the thing though, you'll get a reply from somebody, or I bet somebody's listening say, "Oh man, I've heard a turkey like that." But here's the thing: there was so many cell phones and so much video out there. There's not a single one posted online of a hen, that sounds worse than a hunter. It's
that's a good
there's
point.
more footage of a Bigfoot out there than it is of a hen that sounds worse than the hunter.
Yeah,
So if someone has footage of a hen that sounds worse than hunter, please share it with me because I'd love to see it, but I have yet to see one.
yeah,
Anyway,
and even if there is one out there, or even a couple out there,
somebody
across.
kicked her in the neck, and that's why she sounds so bad.
And it doesn't mean that you can go out there and sound like her and
Yeah.
be attractive to a gobbler.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly right. Here's the thing: she can walk, and she looks like a turkey, so she can sound rough as can be. If there's one out there that does sound rough, that gobbler sees her. You can sound rough, but as soon as you start to move, that gobbler's out of there. Yeah, she
Yeah,
has the advantage of walking around and moving and looking like a turkey.
yeah, absolutely. So let's jump in just a little bit more on the calls because this is an area that I've been trying to really improve in, and I think a lot of guys could probably stand to get a little bit better. I'm heading out to the turkey woods here in just a couple of weeks. I've got my calls. I figured out my airflow. I bought a box call that sounds okay, or I've got a pot call that sounds okay. What are some of the cadences or types of calls that I need to be able to do out in the woods? Now, you listen to guys who are up on the stage in a competition, and man, they can just or like you, it's like an extension of who you are when you're on a turkey call. And I'm like, man, I'm never gonna be, I'm never gonna be that good. So if I wait until I'm at that point to go out in the woods, I'll never get to hunt, right? So what are some of the things that I need to be able to do with that call when I'm out there?
you don't need to do a great deal. I mean, if I was just watching other people hunt and things, I think they rely too much on just yelping and purring. You see that a lot. They're sitting there and for no rhyme or reason they just go brr, 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 just they're just making turkey sounds they heard on TV or wherever. I think you need to just you can keep it basic, but just do turkey talk. Don't worry about the purring. I think you'll have more success if you can do some cutting, and yelping. Don't worry about all the soft stuff to begin with.
Sure.
If a turkey's out there gobbling, yelp to him. Maybe cut to him. Pop pop yelp 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 yelp. Listen to a hen. She'll pop 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 yelp 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 yelp, and then that gobbler will fire right back. Um, but you rarely hear a hen out in the woods just going brr, brr, yelp yelp brr, yelp yelp yelp. Just some, I think you don't have to get too crazy with your calling, but I think like the yelping and the cutting, those are two standard calls. I think really have better odds of calling that bird in than some all this other stuff that people try to teach you to do. Again, you should always continue to advance your education in turkey vocalizations and your calling ability if your goal is to improve your odds. But you don't have to do a lot of fancy stuff. But yelping and cutting, I think, is a place to start.
Yeah, and you've got quite a few videos on your channel, correct, devoted to giving tips and that sort of thing, helping folks get better at
Yeah,
calling turkeys.
there's some calling tutorials on there that I did for the NWTF, but I've got them linked in a playlist on my channel as well. Plus, there are some my own or tutorials that I uploaded directly to my channel. There's some tutorials on conditioning a pot call, and that's a thing I'd like to mention before we move on is not only uh, when you get a pot call or a box call as a starter call, but look up tutorials on YouTube, for instance, on how to actually hold the call properly and run the call. A lot of times I see people holding the striker for the pot call in a weird way that it really inhibits the call from making good quality turkey sounds. They're not holding the striker properly. They're not holding the pot properly. They got it in the palm of their hand and it's just killing the sound. It's deadening the sound where they should be using it with the tips of their finger holding it. The box call, they're lifting the lid of the box call with each stroke where they just should be sliding it back and forth. It's simple stuff like that that's easy to find tutorials for that will make a drastic improvement in your calling just for those correcting those few mistakes right there.
Yeah, and the NWTF has also got quite a few videos on their website with live turkeys, so you can get on there and listen to that instead of listening to your buddy or listening to yourself and thinking, oh, I think I'm getting there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, not to push my website, but I've got quite a collection of turkey, not only turkey but owl vocalizations and jake yelping stuff on my website called All Turkeys, for that purpose, for people to listen to and learn to hear actual animals making the sounds and not their buddy. And the NWTF, like you said, has a library of vocalizations as well.
Yeah, I was watching one of yours. You've got a jake yelp on there. And the first time I realized that I might be making jake yelps, I went onto your website and I went and watched your video of a jake yelp, and I'm like, oh man, I've been doing a jake yelp all year long.
Yawky. Yawk.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a lot like sometimes when people are running a box call, has that real yawky sound to it.
Yeah. And it's funny. I set up just a quick little story. I set up on a bird last year, got real tied into his roost, and I didn't know it, but roosted probably 45 or 50 yards from him were a bunch of hens. They flew down into the field first, and he flew down. I thought he was going to go their direction. And so I started calling, and he turned around and came straight over to where I was and started strutting. And I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. I'm like, man, I just called this Tom off of all these hens. Like, well, he thought there was a jake coming in from the other direction. Yeah. So it worked in my favor, but I wasn't making the sound I wanted.
But you also, not only could it sound like a jake, but you're a new turkey to the area. And whether this may be news to some people, some people know this, a turkey can recognize voices just like we can. I mean, someone you're familiar with can yell your name out, and without turning around, who called your name.
Sure.
We recognize faces. They can recognize each other also.
Wow.
And I actually have kind of proof of this. I have identical twin brother, and I used to have a pet gobbler, and he would always try to attack me. I'd come out in the yard, try to feed him. He was just a mean little joker. Well, he tried to attack my brother too. Anybody he would try to attack. My brother got, upset with him one day and just, reared back with his hand and slapped the gobbler right in the face. That was enough for him. That gobbler was afraid of him from that day on, but he wasn't afraid of me. So we'd go out in the yard, and my brother'd stop by to visit, and he'd run from my brother, but I'd go there to try to get food out of the barrel, and he would just constantly trying to flog me. I said, hey, come on in the house. Let's swap clothes. So we changed hats, changed shirts and pants and shoes, and walked back out there. Now, we're identical twins. So most people can't tell us apart unless they get to know us. And that gobbler still attacked me and still ran from him. He recognized, even though we were identical. So that's long story short. Turkeys can recognize each other, and they can recognize us if they given enough time, I bet. But they can recognize voices. So not only are you out there, you sounding maybe like a jake, but you're a new turkey, and sometimes that's enough to entice a turkey to come in just because there's a new turkey in the area. And sometimes that's a reason why a gobbler may hang up. He hears an unfamiliar voice out there, and maybe he's not so sure he wants to go check it out. Maybe it's interesting. He in with the gobbler. So people get, I think, get I'm making turkey sounds. I sound less like the other turkeys. We're all turkeys. They don't know the difference between one another. If you got a hen over here yelping and you're yelping, why does he go to that hen and not you? He knows that hen's voice. Same way in the fall when the mama hen, if you ever do a fall scatter, or if you've heard of that fall tactic where you
Mm-hmm.
scatter the flock and you start trying to call them back in, as soon as you hear that adult hen start yelping, it's over with. They're all going to her. They know her voice, and so
Wow.
it all plays out spring and fall. They recognize each other. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so we've got this new guy. Let's say he's got just the essential gear. He's kind of trying to keep it minimal. He's gotten pretty good on his calls. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about how to find turkeys. So, like I said, I grew up in the South. It was very, very difficult. I found anytime I tried to turkey hunt as a kid, I never really could find one. I just could not locate a bird. Come up here to farm country, they're a little bit more visible,
Yeah.
maybe a lot more visible here. But for folks who are listening and saying, okay, this is great, I want to get out there and find some turkeys, what am I looking for? Either cyber scouting on a map or with a property and looking at how a property lays out. What am I looking for specifically to find where some turkeys are going to hang out? Where do I want to start my boots on the ground scouting?
That's an interesting point you brought up about down south and up here. If I was still living down south and I was going to hunt a new place, I would definitely put boots on the ground. Up here, it just seems like as long as there's some mature forest and maybe there's some ag around or whatever, as long as it's not a marsh, a cattail marsh, and it's public land, that's not full of water, there's good odds there's going to be turkeys on it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my cyber scout, I don't even put boots on the ground anymore these days, and it's not because I don't want to. It's just because I don't have time to. I'm
Mm.
usually showing up at a state in the middle of the night and going to hunt it the next morning.
Yep.
I usually scout as I'm hunting, but I just mentioned basically if you're looking online at a piece of public, if there's a lot of mature timber on it, maybe broken up with some clearings and openings, those are good. Most likely going to have turkeys.
Okay.
It's up here. The turkeys are just more plentiful. It seems like, and they need roosting trees. That's the biggest reason. I mean, the biggest thing you're looking for. Oh, food is easier to find, than roosting trees, and they're going to need some water too. And you don't necessarily need to worry too much about water. If there's water on the neighboring property, that's good enough. The turkeys can get moisture out of the bugs and stuff they eat as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, when I'm cyber scouting, I'm looking for, you know, I'm mainly concerned about not necessarily whether there's turkeys there, but I'm more concerned about my access point to get in there and how to approach it, and maybe what's neighboring, button up to that property, and where am I going to start my hunt, depending on the topography of the property as well. Um, but like I said, basically up here in the Midwest, if there's not standing water, then there's likely going to be turkeys there, as long as it has mature woods.
Okay. So mature woods, some openings, maybe a little bit of water, that sort of thing.
Yeah, some
Uh,
ag around is always beneficial.
yep. Yep. So, yeah, let's say we're getting out, we found, maybe even found some turkeys. Now I want to talk a little bit about what separates a successful turkey hunter from somebody who is going to struggle. I have a feeling as you watch people on YouTube, or you hunt with other folks, or you see people all around the country hunting, you see people making a lot of mistakes. So what are those things that you think separates those who go out and kill turkeys from those who go around and hunt for turkeys?
I think, well, there's could be multiple reasons. Sometimes I hear the calling, and I'm like, if they would do this call and instead of this one, or they were capable. But calling's not always, you know, cut and dry. That's going to make success or not.
Hmm.
I think what a lot of people fail to do is be aggressive enough. They sit in one spot. I watched a video recently. They were sitting there and birds came out. I don't even think they called enough. They made a few soft calls, but they didn't even get aggressive in their calling. You don't just have to
Hmm.
be aggressive in your hunting, but aggressive in your calling sometimes works. But they're not aggressive in their hunting as well, as far as making moves on birds. after the birds wandered across the field, okay, and they left and went to they're not interested. Where I would have been probably backing into the woods and circling around and setting up in a different location and calling to them from a different point. I think a lot of people just um, lack the desire or lack the knowledge that, hey, if you can get a little more aggressive and change up your strategy, a lot of times that can be help your success. I mean, I've been on birds before where I spent hours on one side of them moving around calling, and I just couldn't get them to break. But um, I moved around to the opposite side, and it took me a while to get there. Maybe it was the fact that I quit calling during that half hour, 45-minute period trying to get around them that was made the difference. But usually it's the getting on another side of them and getting on the side maybe they wanted to go to that'll help. And just that little simple tactic, I'm able to kill birds within 15 minutes of setting up at the new spot where I was spent 2 or 3 hours at the other spot.
Wow.
No, the distance between the two spots and the turkeys was the same, 100 yards, 150 yards. But being on the other side, they come right in. So uh, I guess basically just don't be afraid to don't just sit in one spot all day.
Yeah.
Don't be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that links back to something you were saying earlier, talking about blinds. I think a lot of guys, they go set up a blind, and man, they hear turkeys, they see turkeys 300 yards off, and they don't go after them. Why
Yeah,
not? Well, you got a 50-pound blind you're lugging around, and
I think it's one of the deterrents hunting in the blind is they don't want to take the effort to break it down and move it and set it up, and that also one of the things I guess I'll touch on is when people always tell you to wear black when you're hunting out of a blind, and because it'll make you darker. Well, the turkey can't see, but what the from your neck up through the window. The rest of it's blocked by the blind. I always tell people to wear full camo when they're hunting out of a blind.
mm-hmm.
If you decide to hunt out of blind, and that way, if you need to make a move, you can just unzip the door and slip out the back, and now you're in full camo, and you can move through the woods. If you're in solid black, now you're a big black object, a black bear moving through the woods. So, yeah,
Yeah, so not being mobile enough is a pretty
it
big
definitely
hindrance
hurts
for
you.
a lot
Yeah.
of guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the strategies a lot of people say is if you're just patient and yeah, you can have some success like that. But um, to me, deer hunting is not deer hunting, and sitting in one location all day is deer hunting, and I don't want to do that with turkeys. I have sat in one location for a long period of time because I knew it eventually paid off, but I can tell you it wasn't nearly as fun as running and gunning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, another thing that I battled with that I didn't anticipate. I'm watching you, and I'm watching THP, and I'm watching all these other guys on YouTube, and then I get out there in the woods, and I realize I'm lacking a lot of that confidence that says you can go get that bird. Like
Hmm.
I hear it, and I think, oh, if I move, I'm going to mess it up. Or if I try to circle around, what if I get too close, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's another one. Just like you said, being aggressive, but then just being confident that you can do it. I mean,
Yeah, and
don't
being aggressive is going to cost you birds also, so to be
sure,
aware of that. I mean,
sure,
sometimes I overthink situations, and because I'm weighing the factors. If I get aggressive here, am I going to ruin the hunt? I could just sit back and wait a little longer, and that's cost me hunts. Also because I've sat there and contemplated too long, and I was too conservative. If I had got on the move sooner, I would have been in position, to make something happen. So I mean, there's always pros and cons to it, but I think overall, if you hunted 10 years being aggressive and 10 years of being conservative, uh, the 10 years of aggressive strategies is you're gonna be successful more often.
yeah. So you mentioned just a second ago, you be aggressive, you get around the bird, and you may be the same distance away, and yet they break that time.
Yeah.
What's maybe the bubble that you're shooting for? Like how close is close enough, and what are some of the factors? I know that's going to be a bit situational, but what are some of the factors that play into how close you want to get to a bird?
The bubble, if I had to pick a range, is within 100 yards, and
Okay.
there's really no set distance. I mean, I could be 150 yards from a turkey, and if I can get just 50 more yards closer, depending on the cover or whatever, it seems like if you get close enough, and this has happened plenty of times for me, and then make a call, the birds break and come right in. You're within that bubble. you're close enough, they're willing to come over and meet you halfway to check you out, and by then you're in gun range. They're in
Mm.
gun range. Other times I've seen it, be 30 yards, and I killed a really nice gobbler in Wisconsin one year, and it was two of them, and they had hens with them and jakes. It was a mixed flock. Even though this was in late May, it was still a mixed flock,
Mm.
and I just couldn't get them to break and come my way. And I crawled through the woods. There was enough cover down low that I kept crawling and crawling, and I didn't know how close I was. I just knew I was getting close, and then I started hearing the drumming of the gobblers, and I just made a few soft yelps and basically was making noise in the leaves. As I was crawling, I was scratching, and I think being that close was finally what got it. And it wasn't the gobblers; it was the hens. The hens finally came over to check me out,
Mm.
and they walked by at like 20 yards, 15 or 20 yards. And then this is how thick it was in there. And the gobblers walked right behind them strutting. And I was able to make it happen. But I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to get that close to a turkey, though. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Oh
this
yeah.
situation, it was just worked out perfectly for me. But the bubble, if I had to give a number, like I said earlier, it's probably 100 yards, 90 yards, something like that. Seems like things start to go better for you if you can get in
Sure.
that bubble.
Sure. So let's talk then just a second about I've got to mention a video of yours I watched recently where you guys are chasing a field bird.
Mm.
And I don't know what you guys could have done differently. I know I went after one last year and got it handed to me. And I would work around to this bird and close the distance. And I'm in the woods. I'm totally concealed. And there's a ridge. I could drop back off the ridge, work all the way down, come up, call, and that thing would move another 100 yards
Yeah,
away from me.
it's
But then
like he could read your mind.
yeah, and
And that's
actually, there were two. It was like there were two gobblers. I'm guessing they were young. There was one hen with them,
mm-hmm.
and I could not get them to do anything. And finally, I ended up spooking them because I was like, I'm either gonna kill them or scare them. One of these, one of the two things is happening. What is going on in that kind of a situation, or what can you do different, or maybe even when do you decide, okay, I'll save this bird for tomorrow?
Well, I was mentioning earlier about being conservative too long. I was actually thinking of that hunt, the one I just posted recently
Okay.
with me and Catman.
Yep.
Catman, the gobbler was there was a grass strip in the middle of the field, and I guess to prevent erosion or whatever, because it was on the hillside there. The farmer had left, and the grass was tall enough to block us and to block the gobbler from seeing us. And the gobbler was off to the right, and Catman kept talking about crawling up to that strip and figuring the gobbler would walk and pass by us, if we got up there. And I kept talking him out of it. I was like, nah, I think he sounded like he was a little closer. And we had a hen down in the woods we had heard yelping earlier. And we figured he may come down and check her out. Plus, we had yelped some. And I was like, maybe we just need to stay here a little bit longer. And finally, I was like, yeah, we probably need to make a move. And we made a move and crawled up to that strip. And by the time we got eyes on him, he'd already passed by. And he was off to the left 80 yards and, going and kept going. And you'll hear me in the video saying, yeah, maybe we should have moved sooner when you wanted to. And it was my fault trying to be too conservative. I think, had we moved sooner, that was just the way the cookie crumbled, I guess, or the luck of the draw. In a field bird, I mean, I hate to say this, you could use a fan on them. I don't. I've used a fan in South Dakota before. It's just not my favorite way to hunt them, and I probably won't ever do it again. It's just um I don't know. I just like to give them the fair chance to come to calling or use my strategy. I don't like to put a big fan up there. Um, I don't have anything against anybody doing it. It's just not for me, I guess. Even though I've tried it before, it's just something that I feel like I'm kind of cheating myself the experience. Um,
Yeah.
the field birds are funky birds. I mean, it was like this one here could read our mind, like I said earlier about yours. We would make a move on the turkey and then he'd go this way. We'd circle around this way, and before we get there, he'd already went over here. It's like he knew he was one step ahead of us the entire time.
Mm.
I just hate field birds, so I don't know. I don't know a real good answer except for maybe if you got time to watch the field and see his coming and goings. set up where he likes to come and go and don't make a sound. Just wait for him to walk by.
Yeah. So maybe in that instance, treating it a little bit more like deer hunting.
Yeah. If you want to use a decoy in the field, I mean, I guess that'll work. It's just sometimes these field birds, they won't even react to a decoy. They just stand the ground. They insist you come to him. It seemed like this guy when we were hunting, that was his whole persona there. I mean, he would sit there and strut and gobble, and then a hen would come up to the field and he would breed it, and then she would leave, and he just walked the top. He would stay on the high ground of that field because that field rolled over, and he'd walk one end to the other, and just the hens would come out of the wood and breed, and he or hang out for a little bit, not necessarily breed, and then go on their own, out on their own. It was like that was his strut zone, I guess you could call it, his strutting area. He was highly visible there, and he had the advantage of being able to see any danger approach.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm
safety and
not
no
much.
reason to leave.
I'm just no help for you on field birds. I don't like them. I'm a timber hunter. I prefer the hunting the timber.
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of fields up here, and I'm
Yeah.
driving around watching them in the fields, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to figure out something. But it makes me feel a lot better that you don't like them. I feel like I'm
No,
in
I
good
don't.
company.
Oh, I'd like to kill that one because he was huge, but this sure is a challenge to hunt him sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned a little bit earlier about a mixed flock in May and that being odd. We talk a lot about with deer hunting. You hear about the early season when they're on food, and then you got the pre-rut, the post-rut, then you got late season, they're back to food. And I feel like it's pretty well it obviously well documented, but a lot of people talk about the phases of the whitetail season. I don't feel as though I hear as much about that when it comes to turkeys, and maybe it's just that I'm new to this whole game. But talk to me a little bit about what turkeys are doing throughout the year. So let's use Wisconsin as an example. Our season comes in April, goes through I think June 1st this year. So what is the year or the season in a turkey's life going to look like, and how might that impact the way that I'm trying to hunt them?
Okay, I'll start off in the summer and go from there.
Okay.
So in the summer, you have hens with poults, and sometimes other hens with poults will meet up, and they'll have multiple hens with poults and all their poults. Sometimes there'll be hens that don't have poults that are joined in. So you'll have basically a flock of multiple hens and multiple poults from multiple families or multiple hens. You also have bachelor groups of males. A lot of times the longbeards will hang out together and the jakes will hang out in their little groups, but you also see some jakes mixing. But so you got the males grouping up, and then you got the hens with poults grouping up, and then you'll have hens that don't have poults that'll group together. So you may see 3 or 4 hens, and you always hear this, the negative Nancy's out there. Oh man, our hatch must be bad. I saw 3 hens today, and not a single one of them had poults. Stuff just happens. um, but if you see hens together no poults, that's just hens that either didn't breed at all,
Hmm.
and sometimes they're juvenile hens that didn't breed. And you can identify the age. I can't. I don't necessarily go in detail. There's a link on my website that shows you how to tell the difference between a mature bird and a juvenile, even the hens.
Okay.
But anyway, sometimes the hens are together, and then the hen. So that's your 3 main groups, maybe 4 if you got jakes together. As it gets into winter and fall, and mainly winter, they'll start kind of intermingling, and the groups will get bigger. The males, like the toms, will still kind of stay on their own for the most part, but you may get some other hens coming into those hens with poults as those poults got more mature. Down south, you didn't see this really, or I didn't see it at all. But up here in Minnesota, Wisconsin, you'll see turkeys, I guess, yard up like deer,
Mm-hmm.
especially if the winter's real bad. If there's a farm with cattle and silage and stuff, I've seen, a flock of 200, 300 turkeys
Wow.
just wintering basically at that farm. And
Yep.
you may not see turkeys anywhere else in the
Yep.
countryside. Um, but then as it gets closer to spring, you'll have those flocks start breaking up. The jakes are going together. The toms will start mixing in with those hens and collecting their harem, I guess. And sometimes the jakes will hang out, especially if there's a jake hen with poults. Her poults are getting maturity. She's got some jakes in there, and she's got some jennies, and then the toms are in there to breed. That's why sometimes you'll see some jakes running around with that group. Those jakes are just the offspring of the mature hens in that flock. And then you've got jakes off, and they're running in their little groups, and that cause trouble sometimes and run off your tom if you're calling one in. You may have subordinate toms over here. So now you've got more. You still got several groups, but they're different dynamics to what's in there and going on. But as the year progresses, or as the season progresses, you get later in the season. Typically, you'll see one or two mature toms, and they have one or two hens with them. Some of them are getting shot, so now you got one tom with just a couple hens. Some of the subordinates are going more into their summer phase. They're not as interested in breeding, especially late in the summer. You may see some toms or jakes that don't even care to react to a hen talking if you're yelping to them. And then the other ones are fired up and gobbling their heads off. You'll start that's the time when you'll kill more of the mature toms. They're now more susceptible to calling.
That's later in the season.
Yeah, where before they could just stand there and gobble and their hens would come to them. Now later in the season they're losing their hens, and I killed one of my biggest turkeys up here in Minnesota. It's the number 3 bird in the state right now. The last day of the season, he was just gobbling his head off. He was still a difficult bird. I couldn't get him to budge, but I was able to use his enthusiasm, his gobbles, to move around on him, and then got into some soft stuff and was able to get close enough. But anyway, so that's what you'll see in the late season. You usually don't see a mixed flock of hens. That seemed like an earlier season flock. They're like opening day, you may see a flock that's still not broke up. There's some jakes and jennies and hens and some toms. So that's what was odd about that one. And then as you get closer to summer, the males break off into their bachelor groups again. They've lost interest in the breeding. I'm sure if a hen came out and squatted in front of them, they would try to breed it. But and of course that's what happens during the summer. If a hen lost her nest and she tried to rebreed, she'd go to a gobbler, and the gobbler would, they would breed all year if the hen would let them.
Really? Okay.
But in the summer they start breaking up. You got gobblers off together in their bachelor groups, jakes together, sometimes a mix of the two. And then now you got your hens that aren't nesting hanging out. The other hens that are nesting are setting on their nest or starting to hatch off poults, and they're going to stay by themselves initially. And then once their poults get maybe a couple weeks old, they'll start inviting other hens with poults to join them, and then the cycle continues. Now, there are variations to all that I just told you. That's just the basic rundown of it.
Sure. Do your tactics change a lot? Now, I know you mentioned, sometimes you can get your older gobblers later on in the season when they start to lose a lot of their hens. Do your tactics change quite a bit, or are you kind of sticking with the same formula from the beginning of the season to the end?
Yeah, I pretty much hunt turkeys the same way from start to finish. I know a lot of people try to put that term phase of the season on there for gobblers, and a lot of that's just marketing tools. You'll hear that from companies trying to sell you something.
Different call for different part.
Yeah, you need to do this. And I'm more of aggressive caller and hunter overall. Beginning of the season, I'm gonna cut and yelp to them. I might get excited. I'm gonna try and call. I'm just gonna judge that gobbler, each gobbler I come across, and I'm hunting. I'm gonna just kind of take his temperature and see how he's acting to determine my strategy. But if I had to narrow it down to one basic strategy: aggressive calling and aggressive tactics, get in there tight for them. One of my favorite tactics is to try and roost a bird. And I know that's hard to do in the South and Southeast. They just don't want to gobble in the evenings. Up here, it's much easier. They love to gobble in the tree in the evening. And one of my favorite strategies up here is to hit an owl hooter or coyote howl at sunset or just after sunset, pinpoint the tree they're in. And I don't just like to say, oh, I heard one gobble on that ridge and then leave. I'll try to get them to gobble again. I'll walk over here 200 yards or whatever and get them to gobble from a different angle. And now I've triangulated and I know almost the exact trees in. And so then I can slip in there real close in the morning. I probably have a 75% success rate on roosted gobblers that way. The next morning, you can get in there tight enough and just a few bubble clucks and soft yelps, and they pitch down right to you.
Come check you out.
Yeah.
Wow. I was able to do that last year on a bird. And I don't know if this is typical, just talking about locating a bird. So I was at the farm that I had permission on, and I was hunting a gobbler, and he was going back and forth between two different fields, and I just so happened to be hunting him in the evening on an evening that he wasn't in that
Mm-hmm.
field. But as I got back to the truck, I heard him gobble on the other side. So I got out, drove around. Good part about here, lots of roads, right? That I can kind of try to triangulate the bird, kind of like you're
Yeah.
saying. And I got to the other side, and I got him to gobble one time, but then he wouldn't gobble again at owl hoots, coyote calls, anything. He would not gobble again. So I came home and I thought about it, and I reasoned from that he could probably see me from where I was
Yeah.
parked at on the road. Is that something that's typical? Because I got in there the next morning, and I killed him 5 minutes after shooting light opened up, and he was right where he could see my car
Yeah.
from the road. Is that pretty typical? Maybe you get one gobble out of them, but if you don't get another, like they might be able to see where you're at.
I've had a couple instances. One was last year in South Dakota where we got them to gobble, and we were up on a hillside. It was open prairie and it was a creek bottom. And I was afraid they might see us go across, because the sun had set in our face basically. So even though the sun was down and it was pretty dark out there, we were illuminated by the
Mm.
the sky. You know how bright it is towards the sun in that direction of the sky. And I was trying to triangulate these birds, and I moved off, a few hundred yards across the hill, and I couldn't get them to gobble again. And you can hear me in the video say, they're sitting there looking at us right now. That's why we
Ah,
can't get them to gobble again.
okay.
The other instance, and I'm sure this happened more than once, was in Wisconsin. Um, I drove down this dirt road, and there was a huge bluff that went up. And I mean, it looked like it was a half mile up in the air above
Jeez.
us. And I got one to gobble up there. And I'm sitting there and trying to get him to gobble again, and he would not gobble. And I happened to look, I noticed something up in the tree up there, and I got zoomed in my camcorder, and I got my binoculars out too. And there he was sitting on the limb looking right down, down there at the gravel road, me looking up at him, and he wouldn't gobble again. And so I know in that instance too, he could see us. So they probably see a lot more than they probably spot us a lot more. But most of the times when I get one to gobble, I'm locating. If you go back and look at some of my Minnesota hunts from this season I just recently posted, I'm so I'm so far away from them. They're lucky if they even see us, and if they did, we're so far away. I mean, you're talking about I'm coyote howling or owl hooting, and it takes several, a second or two for it to get over there, and then another second or two for the gobble to get back. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
a delay. So they, but yeah, they see us sometimes, and that sometimes that's why they won't give you but one gobble, and then they're like, yeah, I'm not gobbling anymore.
Yeah.
They're sitting there looking at you with their big old eyeball.
So let's talk just a little bit about locator calls. I've had a lot of guys that I've talked to that I said, hey, I'm going to be talking with Shane. They said, ask him what locator calls he uses. What does he recommend? What should we be using? So specifically thinking about Wisconsin, I don't know if it differs maybe throughout the country as what tactics you try, but if guys are just are having a really hard time locating birds, or having a really hard time, maybe they get one gobble out of them and they just can't get any more. What would you say to them?
Oh, I think I've had the most success is with the higher pitch or louder sounds. Like I do owl hoots, and if they're really pent up with a lot of testosterone or whatever the hormones are, up on the tree limb, and any little sound to get them to gobble. Just that first little whoo gets them to gobble. But a lot of times it takes to get to that caterwauler and that laughing of a barred owl that I do
Mm-hmm.
to get that to pull that gobble out of them. And even in some other cases, I had to get the coyote howl out and that loud scream. It is so loud and carries so far, and that sometimes work. I know a lot of guys that they use crow calls and pileated woodpeckers, peacock calls, um, you know, some type of whistle or train, the little air horns. It seems like the most effective call for roost, get them to gobble on the roost, is a louder pitch call. On those days that are tough to pull out a gobble, those can pull one out of them. Once daytime rolls around your hunting, I normally just use an owl hoot during the day.
Mm.
It's sometimes I use a coyote howl. I used to carry a crow call with me. I just because I got so much camera gear, I'd rather carry a battery than a crow call, an extra battery. I can do a fairly decent natural voice crow call. I guess it's just up to you. I just seem to have a lot of success with my owl hooting and my coyote howling, and I rely on those maybe too much, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But
What
there's
kind?
definitely go ahead.
What kind of owl hoot
It's
or whatever is it that you use?
this is called the Hooks Harrison Signature Hoot and Stick. That's a
Okay.
long name.
Long name.
So
Yeah.
Hooks Custom Calls sells this call. It was originally designed by James Harrison. He's a multi Grand National owl hooting champion. He's with Hook. He pro staffs for Hooks also. The signature ones, James actually hand turns and does all this stuff, and they're more expensive. And they sound the best. I actually used one in competition and tied for first place at Grand Nationals with it.
Oh wow.
It sounds so good and really. I'm a stickler for realism, so I want to sound like an owl out there. I know a lot of people buy an owl hooter; they just want some volume. They're not concerned so much about realism. I'm more concerned about sounding realistic. I want to fool the owls. I want to fool the owls and fool the other hunters and not give away my location. But my thinking is, and I've had this work, is if I can sound like a real owl, I may not get a bird to gobble that's 400 yards away, but I may get an owl to respond to me that's 400 yards away, and he's maybe 50 yards or 100 yards from that gobbler. And now that owl that hooted close to that gobbler, it was loud enough and it got him to gobble. And I had that happen in South Carolina. I was
Hmm.
hooting and carrying on. I couldn't get one to gobble. And finally, another owl, real owl responded to me. And this is like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun's up high in the sky. He, woo, 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 and then right beside him, a turkey gobble.
Wow.
My calling wasn't loud enough because I was so far away from him. So he's just hearing a faint out. But that's kind of why I got off on tangent there again. But that's why I'm a stickler for realism. But because it sounds so realistic, I use it for competition. I also take it to the woods. And then the other thing is my coyote howler, and that's just my turkey call. I'm just using it because once we talked about earlier, learning your airflow.
Yep.
I'm using the rasp of a Yelp to bark with,
Okay.
and I'm using that key, the clear front note to create the howl.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm still working on my Yelp, so it's probably going to be a
mm,
while before I break out a coyote
mm.
on a turkey call. But yeah, I think that's helpful with the owl hooting. So we've talked a little bit about roosted birds, right? Trying to roost a bird. You said you have really high success rate when it comes to birds that are roosted. And something you mentioned earlier, when you're looking at a piece of property, they got to have roost trees. And I'd never really thought about that much until last year. There are some trees turkeys really can't roost in very well. So what are you looking for when you say I want to find some spots that may be nice roost trees or whatever? What am I looking for? Because here in Wisconsin, there is quite a bit of different timber. I'm from Alabama, and so it's
Just full of
3,000 acres of
pines down
pine
there.
trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, they do have a diversity of tree types. I typically look for more mature trees, although I have seen turkeys roost in little scrub trees, and that
Okay.
was all that was available in the area.
Gotcha.
Um, and maybe they did a timber cutting or something. Now the turkeys that are left, they're just roosting whatever's there. They're probably going to disappear, but um, they basically need. I don't know. They don't have to have a limb the size of a broom handle. A little bit bigger than that's probably ideal. I've seen them roost on limbs that are much bigger than that. Um, but basically, so I'm gonna go on a little side story here.
Sure.
A turkey can't close its toes. They don't have muscles in their toes to close it. It's a
Mhm.
tendon that runs up the leg, and when they bend their leg, it pulls it tight and pulls their toes closed. So if you watch a turkey that's running, as it bends its leg, the toes close up.
Interesting.
So when
Okay.
a turkey goes to sleep on the roost, it squats down, and that squatting the bent leg locks those toes around that limb. So they can sleep and they're not physically holding their toes closed.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
it's not just turkeys, it's other birds, songbirds, robins, you name it. They don't operate their toes with muscles, or it's just a tendon.
Interesting.
Anyway, so basically you need trees that have somewhat horizontal growing limbs and bigger trees with those types of limbs. So when you see some of these these scrub trees out there that the limbs are all growing at like 45-degree angles, and they don't have a nice substantial limb coming off at a more of a horizontal angle. Um, those are not ideal. Pine trees are a perfect example of good roosting trees. You see most of the limbs come off at nearly a horizontal angle. Oak trees have enough diversity in the limbs and stuff coming out in sizes that there's usually some good roost limbs in it, and they'll land on a roost on a bigger limb, that's 6 inches in diameter stuff. But it seems like they typically look for that ideal, I guess, the thickness of our arm type of
Mm.
limb, or maybe just a hair smaller. Um, yeah. So if you had to look for a general species, pines or oaks would be your top two. Um, Douglas firs and stuff like that, it just seems too thick, around it from to get in there to the limbs.
Yep.
It needs to
Yep.
be openings from to land up on the limbs. Trying to think what all trees are up here. Your aspens and birch are just horrible for roosting trees. Although I'm sure occasionally they use them. But basically, when I say mature uh, timber on a property, I'm looking for like oaks,
Okay.
for the most part. There's not a whole lot of pines up here. There are a few here and there, not like they are down south.
Yep. Yeah, so you've talked a little bit about some things that have really contributed to your success. Sounds like one of them is being able to roost a bird, right? Like that's a big deal. The second is some aggressive calling and you being aggressive on the ground, not being afraid to make a move on a
Yeah.
bird. Is there any are there any other things that you say, man, when I started doing this, I took my success to the next level? It's something that helped you up your game.
I think the biggest improvement I saw overall was when I started competition calling.
Mm,
My calling improved, and not just the sound that I was making, but how I presented it to the turkeys. I was communicating with them rather than just making turkey sounds. When
wow.
I was younger, I would yep, 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 and that was kind of the every time I was ready to call, I did the same thing. Yep, yep. I wasn't really telling a story or communicating with those turkeys.
Mm,
Now, and it's still a big guess a lot of times, to be honest. I mean, as long as I've been doing this, when I'm talking to a turkey, I picture in my mind what I want to sound like over here, or what I want to convey to the turkey. I may not be trying to tell him to come over here, but I may be trying to convince him that there's a hen here, and then there's a Jake here. There may be a Tom walking around. I'm just trying to paint a picture of something going on over here.
yeah.
Sometimes I'm just pretending I'm a lone hen, and I was like, and I'm insisting he come over here. I'm cutting. I may go into a 2-minute sequence of just just cutting nonstop of an agitated hen. And I've heard it enough, and it's helped me enough that I use it, and it continues to be help me be successful. I'll give a quick story. I was set up on this field edge one time, and basically didn't have anywhere else to hunt, and it was just this field that was surrounded by timber of the neighbor's property. And it just so happened one of their trees had fallen down, I guess, and landed in the field there, and grass had grown up around it. That was the only thing I could hide myself with, was to
Mm,
set up around that tree. And a hen comes in. I heard some birds gobbling off behind me on the neighbor's property off in the distance. They would gobble to my calls, but they didn't budge. And she came in, and she saw me sitting there against that tree. And I don't know if she had a nest there or just didn't know what I was. But I was like, if she tries to go past me to the left, I'm gonna scare her off, because I didn't want her going to those gobblers. And she come in, she's like, "Puck, puck, puck," and she got to about 6 feet from my foot, and I lunged at her, and it scared the piss out of her, and she went straight up in the air, and then landed like 30 yards out in front of me, or off to my right a little bit, and she starts cutting, and she starts walking towards me, and I'm like, "Are you crazy? Kidding me?" She comes right back to me to figure out what I was. All I did was lunge, and then I got still again. And maybe she had a nest there. I don't know. Maybe that's why she was insisting on coming back. But as she started cutting, I could hear the intensity of these gobbles behind me. They picked up. So I started cutting back with her. She was pack, pack, and I was pack, 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 back and forth. Pack, 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 pack. It was just two hands there cutting back and forth. And those birds were going crazy behind me. Finally, they shut up. and she cut some more, and then she slipped in the woods behind me. And it wasn't 5 minutes later, probably less than that. It just seemed a little bit longer, but I hear, the drumming, spitting drum of a gobbler,
Yeah.
and off to my left, here they come. They had all that cutting, it broke them gobblers, and they come right in. And I've done that on a few hunts. I've got another one on video that a youth hunt. I did the same tactic. And so, how did I get to this point?
Yeah. We were talking about just other things that have taken
Yeah,
your success maybe to the next level.
yeah.
And you
Just
start talking about your calling.
yeah, just not just making turkey sounds, but communicating. And that was, Jake Yelps is communicating. You're trying to convey that there's some Jakes over here. I guess if you don't know how to communicate with them per se, just imagine a scenario you want to create and just start yelping and Jake yelping or do whatever to create maybe a mixed flock. And don't worry about him over there gobbling, because his gobble shouldn't dictate what's happening over here. You should just do your thing and make him finally decide to come look. But yeah, cutting that instance there, we were painting a picture. We were communicating with each other, me and the hen, and not them. So just being realistic, I guess. All it's just turkeys talking out there in the wild to each
Yeah.
other.
I like the way you say that, painting a picture or telling a story. And even like you said just a second ago, this is going on irregardless of what he's doing.
Yeah,
You're not even worried about
yeah.
him.
You're not part of the picture. If you want to be, just come on over here.
Come on over. Shane will make you a part of the
Yeah,
picture real quick,
yeah.
right?
We'll put you on video.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things that I hear a lot about now. Last year, I set up on a couple of birds. I really didn't even get to hunt that many times. I had two hunts that were just 5 minutes off the roost. Hunt's done. I'm going home, and a couple of setups in between. But I had a very short turkey season last year. It's not how I thought it was going to go. What do I do though? Let's say this coming year, I'm thinking I can't be that lucky all the time, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just going to get them right off the roost. What I do on those mornings where I get out there and I don't hear a thing, like maybe I know they're roosting over here, but they're just not gobbling. Or maybe I hear them fly down and they don't make a peep. They head off in the other direction. So actually I had that happen to me once last year. I set up on some roosted birds and I was hunting behind a farm, and another hunter who had permission there had come in and walked around, stood behind the building. Finally, he saw me and he turned around and left. I had slipped in there in the pitch black dark at like 3 a.m. I mean, I'd been there for a long time, and he comes
Yeah.
in right before fly down. I hear the birds fly down. They go the other direction, never gobbled or anything. So
Yeah.
what do I do on those mornings when I've got, when I hear nothing,
But there's turkeys around.
but I know there's turkeys nearby. They're just not responding. They're not talking to me.
But I guess there's two main tactics I'd use in like some of these areas. I run and gun at it, and I'll go to a spot. If I don't hear anything there, I may move off to another one and go, just venture not very deep in the woods to make some calls. In other cases where I know there should be turkeys there, and maybe they're just not talking, I basically turn the dial back to I'm in no hurry mode.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
may just sit there on a rock outcropping or on the edge of the field and just let the morning do what it's doing. I may even throw a few calls out there or walk through the woods slowly. I one of my favorite approaches on those days too is just to take it nice and slow through the woods, take it slow and easy. Slowly walking, listening. Every once in a while, make a call, sit down, maybe just sit one spot 15 minutes and wait. A lot of times, those birds that were quiet at daybreak at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, just their switch goes off and they change moods and they start gobbling.
Hmm.
Or it's like something triggered in the barometer or something, and multiple birds start gobbling. And then other days, you never hear anything. You just spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours out there slowly walking around and not hear anything. But um, I guess it's not a bad idea just to don't be in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
Don't not all hunts happen in the first 30 minutes of daybreak.
Yep.
Just take it easy. I mean, unless you have somewhere to go, don't be in a hurry. Just enjoy the day, and hopefully it'll turn around. And I've had a lot of success that way, just taking it nice and slow and easy. And like I said, a bird all of a sudden just fires off, or you get with him within his bubble. He was 300 yards away when he heard you calling. He just didn't gobble. Now you're 150 yards away and you make out some, let out a few yelps or a cut, and he hammers back. Okay, now he's like, oh, time for business.
Yeah, now we're in the game. So one more situational, I guess, hunting related scenario. So let's say I'm out there in the woods and I've got one coming in. Um, I've gotten inside of that bubble and I think he's coming and I want to make a setup. What are some of the things that I'm looking for? I think the temptation, I saw you mention the other day on a video, actually on YouTube, you had commented that something about like, that's a classic case of being in too thick a cover. Basically,
Yeah.
you're just in it too thick. And but I got to realizing, like, there's a lot that plays into what's the ideal scenario. If I'm in big timber, and there's a little rise out in front of me, like what am
Yeah,
I what am I trying to do?
that was the hunting publics video I'd watched, and
Yeah.
they were struggling to get a shot at this bird. Now, obviously, like I mentioned before, I wasn't there, and so a camera only gives you a narrow perspective, and also the fact that they're trying to get coordinated, the gun and the camera. And I'm sure
Yep.
Ted had opportunities to shoot, but the camera wasn't on.
Sure.
But I think that setup there, they had brush in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some hunters will make that mistake of trying to get too concealed, and now they're causing problems for shot opportunities when there's a bird in front of them. And I get it. Some people are just so paranoid about being busted. I've watched videos on YouTube of a guy hunting him out of a blind, and he had a little peephole to look through, and there was a gobbler out in front of him, and his breathing was so heavy, and he was trying to slide the barrel of the gun through that little hole, and I'm like, dude, relax. He doesn't even know you're in there. You got a little peephole to look out of, you know? So I get that there's different degrees of people's anxiety or paranoia about being busted. And so some like to get a little too much cover. Um, then there's other guys I see that maybe hunt a field edge and they just plop down right next to a tree right on the edge of the field. And I'm like, man, as soon as a turkey comes out, he's going to see you immediately. You're
Mm.
just too exposed. So there's a balance you got to have. I like to have a little bit of shadows. I like to have a little bit of back cover, maybe a twig or two in front of me with some leaves at maybe breast height, I guess,
Okay.
or just below my gun if it was resting on my knee, just to give me a little break it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think what saved me on my Michigan hunt that you're going to see soon and may be out by the time this podcast goes live, that the shadows and the cover where I was at saved the day. And I won't go into detail. You'll see the video. It actually saved my butt on me between me getting this bird and not getting it. I had a nice mix of shadows and leaf cover, but not too much where it impeded me being able to shoot. And plus, I have a camera on a tripod with a burlap around it, so that adds another tree trunk right next to me to
Sure.
give me some concealment. But yeah, just I think get as cut. I guess the easy way to put it would be get as concealed as you can without impeding your ability to move your gun left and right and shoot.
Okay.
That would be the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. And you mentioned those shadows being a help to you. I imagine that goes into you said your slow walks, right? As you're working your way through the woods, maybe you're throwing out some calls here and there. Are you paying attention as you move? Like, okay, I'm looking over here, looking over there, like I'm near a spot that would be decent to set up? Or are you thinking about that as you're going? Or are you just, let's wait to hear a bird and then I'm going to start kicking into
Yeah,
gear?
I usually I'm better about when I make my call about the area I want to kill one. Like if I get to an area, I'm like, oh, this would be a good spot to call one up to. What I'm bad about is picking out the spot I'm gonna sit down in that area before I make a call.
Yep.
I usually try to say, oh, this is a good area to call one up to, and there's a good tree to sit down next to. I usually jump the gun a lot of times, like, oh, this is a good area to kill one, and I let out some calls, and then when gobbles, now I'm going, oh crap, where am I going to sit? um, but for the most part, I'm not too horrible at it. I'll walk through the woods. If I've walked 100 yards, maybe I haven't seen the perfect area to kill one. I'll look for it. Say okay, this will do. If I sit over there, this will do. Let's make a call here. Or if I'm coming up on a rise or something, maybe it's just I don't want to crest this little hill before I make a call in case there's something on top or just on the other side. Then I'll make a call. But yeah, I'm just trying to be part of the woods when I move through there, like a deer just grazing slowly through the woods. If I see something that looks like, yeah, there could be a turkey nearby, and a lot of that just comes with experience. I can go through the woods, for instance. I've deer hunted so long, especially down in the southeast. A lot of times I didn't even have to see a deer trail, deer tracks. I'm like, oh, this would be a good spot to kill a deer, and it would hang a stand, and deer would come through there the first afternoon without not even seeing a trail or anything. It just looked. You after years of experience, you just get that mindset. You can just instantly see something, say, "Yep, got to be a killing spot here."
Yep.
But so it's hard to convey all that in a podcast, but just think about, I guess, constantly be thinking as you're walking through the woods, and just take it slow, whatever.
Sure. And I think something you just tapped into, it takes a lot of experience. And I think a lot of guys, especially these days, in the days of podcasting and the days of YouTube, we can cut that learning curve a bit, but there's no replacement for that experience. Those moments you step into an area and you're like, there's a buck in here.
Yeah,
there's going to be turkeys in here.
You could listen to every podcast and watch every YouTube video from the hunting public or Dave Owens or whoever from the time you're 3 years old until now. And if you never stepped foot in the woods, you're going to be just like a person who's never seen any of those videos and never hunted before. I mean, it takes, you're going to have a slight advantage, I guess.
Sure.
But boots on the ground, like you said, and just getting out there, encountering animals, learning from your mistakes. Mistakes make you a better hunter. And failures and unfilled tags definitely make you a better hunter.
A little motivation goes a long way.
Yeah. You learn from all those reasons you didn't fill a tag.
That's right. Well, the last, I guess, hunting specific related thing I want to ask you, when you've got a bird, you've been working him 2-3 hours and it's just not happening. What informs your decision when you say, you know what, not today on this one? I'm going to leave him and I'm going to go either look for another one, or what informs that, especially in a dense turkey populated area like southern Wisconsin, where I'm at. There's turkeys all over the place. If I don't go after this one, I can probably go find another one. Yeah. So what are the things that are going to cue me in and that it's time to move on?
That's a much easier decision up here. If I was in Mississippi and there's one goblin, I'm gonna stay with him, because it may be the only one you get on, or Alabama. I say Mississippi, I'm thinking about it because I just they had the draw results out today, so that's fresh on my mind. Minnesota last year, the video I just recently posted is a prime example. We had one in front of us, goblin. I was concerned. I'm pretty sure he saw when he pitched down. He saw us there. He didn't know what we were because we were just getting ready to sit down beside a tree, and he pitched down. I didn't know he was that close, roosted that close. He was still in the tree gobbling when we were moving in closer, and I think he saw us there, and so he was a little leery. While we're working this bird, there's two across the valley just hammering. Every time I'd make a sound, they would gobble. The one in front of us just gobbled every third or fourth time I made a sound. And I told my buddy Aaron, I was like, man, let's leave this bird alone. Let's go after those. Those two over there are just hot. I mean, that's one reason I would abandon bird. If I know one bird's hot and ready to die, it is a little easier to leave one that's 100 yards away and go after one that was a quarter mile away.
Yep.
That hot gobbling bird. It's tough overall. I mean, that situation made it easier for me to figure. I thought he had seen us. So I knew he's going to be a little leery. It made it a little easier to leave him. Had he not seen us, I probably would have just tried to move around on that bird we were still on. So it's, I guess a lot of what happened prior or what's been happening will dictate that. Like I said, if there's one goblin 100 yards from me and I know he hasn't seen me, and maybe he's just not budging, and there's some over here gobbling off in the distance, I probably will stay with him longer, just moving around, see what I can do with him before I totally abandon him and go after the other ones. A lot of times they probably have hens with them. They're just gobbling, wanting you to join them. It's a tough decision though, but I'm more apt to go after a hot goblin bird that's in the mood. It seems like he's in the mood to die, but
yeah,
I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
Sure. Yeah. So when it seems like there's a legitimate better option,
then you're gonna there you go.
Start thinking about leaving that one.
I'm sure none of them are ready to die, but it's a better option for me.
Yep. Absolutely. So You're getting ready to head out here in the next couple of weeks, right? Start heading all around and doing a lot of hunting. Public land is a resource that's there for all of us. You do most of your hunting on public land, is that right? So for those guys who maybe haven't ventured out onto public land for one reason or another, can you give just a quick couple of reasons that guys should give it a shot this spring?
Oh, can I tell them just to stick to private land?
That's fine with me.
I'll tell you why I hunt public land, and then I
Yeah,
guess they
that's
can
great.
make their judgment.
That's great.
The reason I hunt public land, number one, I have nothing against private land hunting. I guess I've gotten permission to hunt private land in the past, and I guess I've had a lot of good experiences on that, and I've had some bad experiences, like where you need to call before you come over, check in. That's kind of one of the biggest things. I hate having to call ahead of time
Mm,
because I'm more
yep,
of a spur of the moment person.
sure.
You know, I'm hunting this side. Oh, I'm gonna run over there in the morning, or it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh man, we need to, for whatever reason, I can't go to this spot. I need to go to another spot. Maybe if I go to the private land, but it's 10 o'clock at night, I can't call him now and wake him up.
Yeah.
So I guess the public land just gives me more freedom to move about as I please without checking in with anybody or worry about, oh, they gave so and so permission also. I can just hop around. There's plenty of opportunity here in the state, or I'm in Minnesota, but over in the state of Wisconsin where I hunt a lot. Plenty of opportunity. The game is abundant, it seems. There's plenty of public land here. And I know some people are like, oh, there's not that much. You're blessed in Wisconsin with all the
Mhm.
VPAs and the WMAs and the state forests and county forests and school property that some of that you get to hunt. I mean, it's just an enormous amount of public land, accessible land. And in Wisconsin, people are more apt to give you permission to turkey hunt private land than down south. You won't even get, they'll slam the door in your face down south.
Yep.
Up here,
Yep.
they don't seem to mind giving you permission to turkey hunt. But with all that said, I just enjoy the freedom of public land, and there's some of the public land up here can be just as, maybe not just as good as private, but it's pretty darn close.
Hmm.
And so that's why I like it up here. I like
Yeah.
public land in general, just so I don't have to ask people. It's our land, I can
That's
come and
right.
go as I please.
That's right. I like having a little bit more room to spread out.
Yeah.
I'm
No, that's too, because
not being restricted by 40 acres or 100 acres even.
yeah, although I do love some smaller tracts, most private land you get access to is going to be 100 acres, 400 acres, something like that, even smaller, 60 acres, where public's going to be 1,000 acres, 20,000 acres, 40,000 acres. And so you can, especially if you're on an out of state hunt like I am, it gives you a chance to look at one tract of property, drop a bunch of pins where you think you might find birds or deer, whatever you're there to hunt, and just roam,
Mm,
freedom to roam a
yep.
lot farther.
Yep. Well, Shane, I've taken up, I think, enough of your time at this point, but one thing I do want to know, what do you have on the docket for the season? You said results for Mississippi came out.
Yeah, I
Is
didn't
that
draw anything from Mississippi, so I'm
okay?
gonna just draw. I'm gonna just be hunting the general public, like always. It seems like
Yep.
um, they do have a lot of states have quota hunts. Florida had their lottery or their drawing a while back. I didn't draw anything there either.
Ooh,
Yeah,
tough
it's
spring.
it's not bad. I mean, quotas definitely make some of these quota hunts do make it a little bit uh better experience, I should say, a little less hunting pressure,
Yep.
a better chance at killing one, but it's not the end of the world. It's not my first time hunting just general public, obviously. But anyway, the results from Mississippi came out today, and I didn't draw, so I got to pick which regular public track I'm gonna hunt. And I mean, some of these quotas you can hunt them after the first 2 days anyway. It opens to the general public. You just don't get first crack at the turkeys.
Okay.
Um, so I got to choose where I'm going in Mississippi, and then I'm off to Florida. Then I had come back home to the Midwest, and I work a full time job, but I get all my 40 hours in on the weekend. So I come home and I work 3 days, 3 12s,
Nice.
get paid for 40, and then go hunt for 4 days. So a lot of
Nice.
people think I do this for a living. No, I do this for fun, but it's a lot of freaking work. Um, anyway, I come home, work for a weekend, and then I'm gonna hunt the Midwest. I think I'm gonna take my recurve out to Nebraska and try and kill one of the recurve. Hunt South Dakota's archery also. I have some gun tags for both states. Go back during gun season. I'm gonna bounce around Nebraska and South Dakota for much of April.
Okay.
I'm gonna hit Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, obviously. I'm going to Michigan. I'm waiting for the draw results to come out from Michigan to see if I drew a tag for that week of June season. Because that'll finish out my season.
Yeah, is that the latest one in the country? Their season?
There's a Maine goes to like the 3rd or 4th or something like that.
Okay.
But Michigan goes to the 7th. So I think it's it's the longest in the nation. They just added that last year. It was the first time they added that.
Yep.
If I draw that tag, I'm thinking about trying to fit in PA, go to PA, and then hit Michigan on the way back home for that final stretch of the season. So that's pretty much my season right there. I've thought about hitting Wyoming. I have about 9 core states or definite states I'm gonna hunt. I guess be Mississippi, Florida, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and South Dakota. 7 states I'm for surely gonna hunt, and then 2 or 3 add-ons possibly. Yeah, there you go.
Gotcha. Sounds like a full spring.
Another fun, grueling spring turkey season.
The difficulty is part of the fun, though, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sleeping in my truck and eating gas station food, nights alone on the middle of nowhere in South Dakota.
It's hard to beat.
Yeah, it is. It's fun though. Looking back at those memories, I wouldn't trade it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Shane, thanks for your time. Where can folks go and learn more about you, get access? I'm looking forward to getting on your website here and checking out this kit that you've put together as I try to get ready for the spring. So what's your website? Where can we find you on YouTube or social media?
So my website is callingallturkeys.com. And then my YouTube channel is just Shane Simpson. If you have trouble finding it, it should be like one of the first results, top of the page. I have playlists on there for turkey hunting. It's called Calling All Turkeys. I have a playlist for the deer tracking. It's called the Cali Chronicles. And then I have some deer hunting on there. It's called Public Land Whitetails. Instagram, Shane Simpson Hunting. It'll be Shane _Simpson _hunting, I guess. Facebook, Shane Simpson. I also have a Calling All Turkeys Facebook page. I'm on TikTok, Shane Simp Zenith, I guess is my username.
Oh, man. Just type in,
yeah.
TikTok.
Catman taught me in that. If you don't know who Catman, he has a YouTube channel, Catman Outdoors. He's like, man, I can't believe you don't have a TikTok. You like to put all those funny things on Facebook and stuff. I was like, I haven't even looked into it. I went on there. I spent the first day. I don't know. I got addicted to it. As the first day I was just looking at these little clips on there. And I was like, man, I got to get off there. Thanks a lot, Cat, man. You done got me suckered into this. And so I've got some tip videos on there, some little short 1-minute tip videos. Also got them on my YouTube channel. But those are the areas you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I would highly recommend folks get on there and check you out. I know, like I mentioned earlier, this past year was my first year doing a lot of turkey hunting, and pretty much everything I knew came from you, from Catman, and from watching the guys over at THP. So I certainly appreciate that resource that you're putting out there for everybody. It's something I think all the listeners should head over and check out. So thanks a lot for your time. Maybe we'll check back in at some point later in the season, maybe after turkey season goes out, and hear how things went.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, and I enjoyed the conversation.
And that is a wrap. Big thanks to Shane for coming on the episode today. Go over to his YouTube page, subscribe, watch his turkey videos, learn what you can about turkey hunting there. Also, be sure to follow along with him this fall and the Cali Chronicles as he and his dog Cali track wounded deer in the upper Midwest and Midwest in general. Also, you can head over to his website, callingallturkeys.com, to get the things that you need for turkey hunting. So Big thanks to Shane. Also, big thanks to you guys for tuning in to another episode. We want to be bringing you guys quality content, and it helps out a lot if you will check out our Instagram page, follow us there, let us know what you think of these episodes. Also, subscribe to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network so that you can be the first to know when new episodes like this and other relevant outdoor content drop. That's all I've got for today. Looking forward to our next podcast. We're going to be talking with Mr. Patrick Durkin, who, if you are from the state of Wisconsin and you're an outdoorsman and you haven't heard of Patrick Durkin, wow, I really don't know what to say. But you're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be a good one. Until then, get outside and enjoy, take advantage of all the awesome opportunities that are ours as Wisconsin sportsmen.